For anyone who watched the Summit of the Bay, which was a series of video discussions about the environment and history and culture, they will recall the person on the other side of the screen, and that is Madonna Soctomah. She spoke in Peskotomuhkati, she issued a prayer, and also spoke in English. Welcome, Madonna Soctomah.
Thank you. Will
You know, Chief Hugh Akagi, for whom I work, thinks that meetings should begin with the language, and the language is a great window on culture and history, and I agree with him. I wonder if you would honor us all with a few words in Peskotomuhkati.
Well, Gamajki cheat media hardman yud zaki gwajimolin naga noskichin one.
Thank you. And what did you say for those of us, including me, who don't speak that language?
I just thank you for the honor of asking me to speak in my language.
Well, our honor too. And do you also write in Peskotomuhkati?
Oh, no.
Ah, okay. Well, let's revert to English because that will give us a broader audience. I'd like to ask you an open-ended question because I'm learning as I go about baskets and artistry and the craft of weaving wood into glorious artifacts that look like delicate flowers and so on. An open-ended question, what can you tell me about that history?
When I was a child, I spoke only Passamaquoddy. And in my community here at Zibayik, a lot of women made baskets. My grandmother made baskets. My mother braided sweetgrass, and there were many basket makers, many sweetgrass braiders, and they could make that sweetgrass sing. They braided so fast, and the house would smell good. And as I woke up, I missed a step. My windows were usually open in my house upstairs where I sleep, and you could hear the ash, the pounders pounding the ash. I could see one across the road from my window, and they would on the wet the ash and kept pounding it very with a rhythm, and they never miss a beat on where that axe landed, because if you looked close up with any ash pounder, you could see those beats just enough over from the first when they put that axe down. And it's quite an art. The people enjoyed what they doing, and I think it was their creativity coming out of them for the people who did that.
Did I understand you correctly that they were pounding the ash so quickly to make it thin, to make those beautiful looking flowers that weren't flowers, they're pieces of ash wood, but they're doing it so quickly, but there's no line in between showing each beat. It is a continuous thin piece of ash. Do I have that correct?
They would beat it to a certain thickness. Then they would use I don't know what you call it in English. They would use, they call it a beat do tamod. It was two sticks like this, and you put the ash and you split it, and you kept splitting it depending on the type of basket you was going to make. Of course, the fancy baskets would use the real thin ash, and to do the flowers or the ornamentation on the ash baskets required thinner ash.
Now, was the thinness was achieved through splitting, but was it also achieved through pounding?
Well, you have to pound it first, and then you go for the thickness that you want for the type of basket you're making. And my people also use gauges to split the ash in the width that they needed, depending on the basket they were making.
Well, that's pretty skilled stuff.
It is.
In modern times, you would use a set of calipers, and I've sometimes made sure the gap in my spark plugs is the right gap, and that's not easy.
No,
What
it's
kind of tool did they use to make sure they had the right thickness?
they had that splitter. It's called bitu damud. Bitu damud is the making it thinner, and then you use the gauges to make it the width that you need for the product you're making. And sometimes they would do sweetgrass, weave the sweetgrass in with using the ash,
Now,
or they would use braided ash.
do I understand that the splitting and the pounding was mainly men's work?
Uh, the pounding, I never did observe a native woman pounding ash, but I saw mostly men. And then the splitting, for the big pack baskets, it's usually the men, and they would shave those thick pieces to make them smooth.
Now, you called it a pack basket. What would you pack in that basket?
Oh, all sorts of things. That's the like they call them the fish baskets, the clothes baskets. They use the thicker material, and it's usually men that made those to work with the thick ash.
And I have in my mind's eye a band across the forehead of an Indigenous person carrying something on the back, this being there to spread the weight. I think that occurs in the plains. Did it occur in your territory?
We had handles for ours. We had handles, and after a while, when they made the pack baskets, they instituted strapping.
Mm.
Yeah.
That seems a little easier to me and a little easier on the forehead, but everybody's entitled to carry their pack basket the way they want to. Now, you've described what the men were doing. What were the women doing at this time?
They were making the ash thinner, and what do you call that? Doing the gauging for the width of the ash. And as later, they started coloring it too. They used to color it with natural materials like berries and blueberries and other fruit. But as it grew, uh, the industry grew, they started using dye. So that's what the women would be doing.
And this would be an interesting convergence of traditional art and craft and then the settlers who brought dye with them or some other materials. Was there a role for children in what I'm imagining is kind of a festival of basket weaving in a community?
As time went on and ash was more scarce than it was in the beginning, then we would get a load of ash, and either people would come and get it and take it home, or they would do kind of a community thing, but that wasn't too often.
I've
Where
spoken
they
I've spoken to some women who remember braiding sweetgrass at sort of grandma's knee or in grandma's bed, actually, at about age 3 or 4. Was that your experience by any chance?
No, I just observed, like my mother in the home. She would tie the sweetgrass around the chair, and she would braid it and loop it around the chair. And you could hear it singing. She braided so fast. And it has to have certain moisture in it too, in order to work with it.
And the chair was there to hold the other end of the sweetgrass so you could pull it and get the
Yes,
tension right, right? And
yes.
kind of like braiding your daughter's hair or your sister's hair, or the same
No,
kind of approach.
no,
Hmm?
no. And as they braided the grass, they would make it into so many yards and then cut it off.
All I meant was that the hair on a young woman's head is attached, of course, to her head, and that allows you to work the hair. Attaching the sweetgrass to the chair allows you to work the sweetgrass a little easier, I guess. How would you describe the singing of the sweetgrass? That's hard to imagine.
It was like a hum, because you're moving the three braids, and it was a hum. You just have to hear it.
And
It's
I'm also supposing you have to be pretty skilled to keep the tension very similar so that the braid remains the same size and doesn't get bigger and smaller as you move down the braid.
You have to know how much braid to put with each of the three strands, and you have to have the certain tension so the quality of the braid would be the same throughout. It's an
Um,
art.
Talking here to Madonna Soctomah, who is educating me about how to make baskets and such, and a bit of the Peskotomuhkati language as well. And before we started recording, I will say you gave me permission to refer to you as Madonna, and thank you very much. Um, can you tell me, this is all very interesting, but the first purposes of a basket must have been to fish or pick up lobster out of the water, make a hat to keep the sun off your head, make a little container to pick berries, a utility basket. How did this evolve into such a complex art and craft?
Demand, the change in our environment and the change of how we lived, and the demand of the tourist in buying them, because that was a whole change in economy or way of life for our tribal people.
And not entirely for the better.
I,
Am I right? Many of the manifestations of settlers did not improve the quality of life, so you had to adapt and make baskets that might produce a living, whereas the living at one time was produced simply on the land.
exactly. And it was for useful things, a way of life. But as the life evolved, the fancy baskets came in because that's what was bought.
Now, as you know, I'm based in what is now Canada, and the Passamaquoddy treaties with France and England predate the existence of both Canada and the United States, and your territory straddles what is now the province of New Brunswick and the state of Maine. The province of New Brunswick is the only officially bilingual jurisdiction in North America where French and English have equal status, and Canada is a federally bilingual country, bit of a sometimes friction in individual provinces, but federally bilingual. So about halfway through our interview, I wonder if we could turn this into a bit of a bilingual interview with you saying a few more sentences in Basketweaving.
Well, I live here along Passamaquoddy Bay, right? And I went to Canada. So, ewas iswian, no jimaja hazibaik, nagandalian Canada, not gauladinen, gumdo alipogiagur wigwamak, medewen skitchin waterwed dahalodenil. So when we traveled Canada to do a dance, we were invited to this home for a feed, and lo and behold, these people were speaking the language that I knew, that I grew up with, that I was born with. And as a young child, not a young child, young girl, Lida Hasid, oh my gosh, done you diddly lay you? Oh my gosh, what's going on here? I didn't learn it in school, but I experienced it firsthand. And that really began my mind wondering what's going on here? What kind of world? Well, the reservation is not all the world, as I found out. And now at this stage, it's a sad thing for our people to be divided by two countries by water.
Well,
That's
you may be familiar with the recent Supreme Court decision in Canada, the Desautels decision, which says that people who have never lived or even visited Canada would have constitutionally protected rights in Canada if they are part of a nation that is based across the border or straddles the border or in Canada. And there are about 50 such First Nations, as we would call them. You might call them tribes in America. And so there is some redress coming, I think.
yes, I'm very happy with that. Gumajnolida has when you Mausuin work is up to my it makes me very happy that our people will once again come together without borders.
Excellent, and you're pretty good at simultaneous translation. Thank you. We were getting into fancy baskets, which are the labor-intensive braiding of sweetgrass, humming of sweetgrass, and dyeing and coloring the ash. So please tell us what you know about that history.
Well, like I said before, it evolved. Do you want it in English, right?
Yes, please.
When it evolved to make a living, if you will, under different circumstances, it was the fancy baskets that were bought because the use of pack baskets is still popular, but the big clothes baskets, what we ended up calling them, they used to use those to move fish in the factories. And of course, the factory era we don't have any factories here anymore. So we had to keep up with the change. And the tourists wanted the fancy baskets as an ornament instead of for use in daily life.
Right, and there are some companies that are not indigenous. One I know of in Columbus, Ohio, made a tremendous business out of making baskets for special occasions: Christmas, Mother's Day, New Year's, Easter, and so on. So that was kind of pretty smart back in settler times, wasn't it?
Mhm. Yes, it was.
Now, I understand that the art and the craft of basket making was almost lost and then rejuvenated. What can you tell us about that?
Well, as we were more colonized and going to a different way of life, the conversation has always been, we're losing our identity. We're losing who we are in being a whole person. And people wanted to do some of the things that their ancestors did because it's very rewarding. Also, if you're an artist, what a wonderful way to show your artistry in art form is through ash, which is one way to do it. So,
And also something that has some utility. Some of those baskets, which look like pillows, are really designed to store sewing materials, and others store toiletries, combs, and so on. And some of them are
this,
disguised as a hat, and some of them are actually hats. So both art, craft, and utility.
I have a comb basket in my bath. I've had it for years and years and years that I still use, and I keep the crushes in there. That
Pardon me, I think we're getting a phone call in the
I
background there, but this conversation is more important. But that's life. Now, how is the state of the craft and art now? Has it been successfully passed down to younger generations? And what is the state of it as an economic activity that helps support the community?
Unfortunately, the basket craft is held together by artists that do that. A lot of our people have taken up different professions. Um, medical, which we didn't before in the way that it's practiced now. Of course, we've had medicine people. When I was growing up, that's mostly what I had as a child was native medicine, roots and everything. But today, that's not the way of the world. So our populations, as they got integrated more into non-native society, they take up different professions. But there's a lot of our people who still pick sweetgrass. The ash is very scarce now, and only certain people would even know how to pick it and where to pick it, because we can't travel the lands like we used to. There's different priorities in the world now than it's
Yeah,
just
and with no disrespect, but with curiosity, lifestyles change, culture changes with time. You have helped us through the discussion where the utility basket became a fancy basket to try to appeal to settlers and be an economic activity. How important is it to preserve this, or is it important to move on and have your people become doctors and lawyers and such other occupations?
I think I think it's best just to incorporate the best of both worlds and make yourself happy and make yourself responsible, because this is a very busy world. So we have to take advantage of the best of both cultures to be the best individuals we can be.
Fair enough. And happiness is an excellent goal. Let me confide in you that one of the difficulties of conducting an interview with an expert like you is, how would I know what right questions to ask? I'm not immersed in the culture. I'm not a basket maker. I'm doing the best I can to understand, but it would be very easy for me to miss an excellent few questions just through my lack of knowledge. So over to you. What did I fail to ask you that I should have asked you?
I don't think there's any shoulds. I think in respecting each other as human beings for where we're at, we would, if we could take the time in such a busy world, I think we could create a better world for everybody and not have it so stressful and everything. If my culture requires the use of ash to make a beautiful product in expression of art or whatever, I think that governments could be have cooperation in making sure that's preserved and not done away with. That's
Well,
important.
well, people who are now Americans do a lot better job of preserving their history than I think Canadians do, it's fair to say. So, for example, the Liberty Bell and Bunker Hill and all these storied stories in American culture, many of which are just made up because a lot of culture is made up. Americans do a better job of that than Canadians. But I hope that you and I have done a bit of a decent job in talking about your culture and realizing why it should be front and center in the life of people who now live in New Brunswick and Maine.
My people did not write down history in the way the colonizers did. So some of that, or a good part of that history that was written down, is not true to begin with. That was a person's perception. And I think it's sad, while they were even writing the history, they would I read a lot of negative stuff about tribal people in history, and I don't think it's factual. And we didn't write our own history.
The reason I'm smiling is not that that is the least bit an entertaining thought. It's a tragic thought. But there is a book out called Lies My Teacher Told Me that goes through exactly that. For example, Pocahontas was probably 11 years old when she allegedly encountered, who was it, Captain Smith. And Smith had told the same story 5 different times in different locations around the world. So it's all just balderdash, and makes a nice Disney movie. Madonna, this has been very helpful to me. And I wonder if you would send us out by saying goodbye or any other things you want to say in your language.
Majem dliwi goodman, psideb mauswinwag, Zankewi Mawi Gulti did Naga Uleo Dultinya. It would make me very happy if people would live together in harmony to make a better world.
Indeed, and thank you. And comme on dit à Nouveau-Brunswick, merci aussi. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Hey, that was fun. That was fun. Thank you.
Are we
Bye-bye.
off?